Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to cross the Øresund once again, and we're going to go back to Copenhagen in Denmark and revisit a brewery that's featured on the channel many times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the years, a few different styles, but I think it is fair to say that this brewery are best known for their different New England hazy IPAs. So the beer that we're going to have a look at today is one of their latest releases over here in Sweden, and I've heard that it is pretty nice. So I'm quite curious to see how this one turns out, and it's always nice to try the new beers from this brewery. So hopefully it's another good one, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then we are going to go to Herlev, which is in the northwestern part of Copenhagen, and we're going to have a look at another beer from Gamma Brewing Company. So this particular beer is called Chiral. It comes in at 6.5% ABV, and this one is another New England hazy, whatever you want to call it, IPA. So this beer was released here in Sweden as part of the local småskalig assortment through Systembolaget for January of 2022, and as I've explained to you in some videos prior to this, when it comes to these local releases, the majority of the beers released are of course from Swedish breweries, and they're always released on the first or so of every month. But when it comes to certain stores that are close to the border regions, you will get some Norwegian beers, and you will also get some Danish ones as well. So down here in Skåne, in the south of the country in Malmö, you can find some Danish beers in the different Systembolaget shops, which is great. So yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see how we go. Always nice to try some new Gamma Brewing beers, and I will explain to you what the name of this beer means a little bit later in the video as well. But let's crack on. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Gamma Brewing Company before, and you will definitely see more added to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Danish beers I've reviewed for you. That's being added to very regularly, of course, because I live so close to Denmark here in Skåne in the south of Sweden, and I love my Danish beers as well. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, on to my brewery notes then to tell you a little bit about Gamma Brewing Company once again then. So Gamma Brewing, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Herlev in the northwest of Copenhagen, the Danish capital in the east of the country on the island of Sjælland. And the company was founded back in 2015 by 4 friends in Copenhagen who were bartenders in various craft beer bars around the city. But they often used to talk about how it would be cool to have their own brewery, and then eventually they managed to do it. So they took in another co-owner in the very early days. So the team at the brewery are Jakob, Anders, Jesper, Coy and Nick. And they all had a little bit of homebrewing experience between them, and 2 of them had also worked for Ulsnegern in Copenhagen, who actually went on to purchase the former Stronzo brewery in Gørløse, and this was what became Ølkollektivet, and a number of breweries have operated there. But one of the co-owners is also the co-owner of the Meg og Ulsnegern bar in Aarhus as well. But apparently in the early days these guys were invited to join Ølkollektivet, and they got a good deal on a 20 hectolitre tank, and they started the brewery without having had any experience of running a business. But safe to say it went quite well for them, and they've expanded twice, and they were producing at around 500 hectolitres at maximum during their time at Ølkollektivet. But Ølkollektivet, as I mentioned to you earlier, has been home to a number of breweries. It's been home to Ulsnegern, Gamma Brewing and Dry and Bitter. Ulsnegern also brewed the Bad Seed beers under contract before they got their own brewery up near Aalborg. Peter, the master of hoppets, of course, works for them these days. But Ghost Brewing and Rooster also used to brew in this facility as well, but they have since moved on. In July of 2020, though, they announced that they were going to move to a new brewery in Herlev, and they worked on building this brewery up over the next few months. In February of 2021, they produced their last beers in Gørløse before they moved into the new site in Herlev, and the first beers were released in March of that year as well. As of January 2021, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 160 different kinds of beer, and as I've already mentioned to you, this brewery are probably best known for their New England Hazy IPAs. Back in the day, they always produced a really mean West Coast IPA as well. I do wish they would do a few more of those actually. I'd love to have another West Coast IPA from Gamma Brewing, and I have had some really nice Imperial Stouts from them over the years, but the last beer we reviewed from them was it was a Rauch beer actually, which I really enjoyed. But yeah, I need to try a few more different styles from these guys, but to be honest, when it comes to the Systembolaget releases, you are kind of limited as to what you can get from the different Danish breweries. But yeah, the next time I'm over or whenever I'm over in Copenhagen, I always have a good look and see what the Danish breweries have been releasing, because I do enjoy covering the Danish beers as well. But yeah, that is all I can really tell you about Gamma Brewing Company for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can of course check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's get on then, and I'll tell you a little bit about the beer itself. So as I mentioned to you, I was going to explain what the name of this beer actually meant. So it's called Chiral, and the concept of chirality in chemistry is quite an interesting one. So the word chiral, if I remember rightly, it comes from Greek, and it basically refers to two structures that are similar, but they cannot be superimposed on each other. So if you look at your hands, for example, they're structured in the same way, but you know, you can't basically force one hand on top of the other and then it looks exactly the same. So in chemistry, this refers to you know, atoms and molecules that have what you call chiral centers. So, for example, carbon can bond 4 times, and if you have 4 different things bonded to it, they can be arranged in different ways, and this can play havoc when it comes to different drugs and things like this. So the 2 different chemicals have similar but yet slightly different chemical properties, and so you call these enantiomers and things. So yeah, if you think about the case of thalidomide, that's probably the most prominent scientific example where there was a mix-up between the R and the S enantiomer, the different configurations, because yeah, if one of them it goes clockwise, one of them it goes anti-clockwise. Been a while since I did my chemistry, so that's as far as my my memory goes, if you like. But yeah, chirality is a concept about the configuration of substituents on a central carbon atom quite often, but there are other ways to look at that as well. But yeah, it's interesting. It is interesting. A very important point when it comes to things like computational chemistry, where they're trying to simulate reactions and stuff like that now. So yeah, that's a wee bit of a scientific, geeky explanation of it. But to tell you about the beer itself, this one, as I mentioned earlier, is a 6.5% New England IPA. It's hopped with Azacca, Cashmere and Mosaic. We know all of these hops quite well. All 3 of them are American. I believe that all 3 of them are roughly about 14% alpha acid as well, if memory serves me correctly. But Azacca tends to give you a nice kind of bright tangerine orange, and also quite a wee bit of pineapple, if I remember rightly. Cashmere is quite an interesting one. You have to be careful with Cashmere because the melon flavours you get out of that can be quite powerful, but it also gives you a good kind of lemon limey component as well. And then Mosaic, as we know, is quite a big tangerine orange sort of character as well. The malt base in this one is Golden Promise, oats and wheat, and the yeast is WLP 66, which is one we've had quite often from Gamma Brewing in the past. So yeah, that's your breakdown of the beer. Just to let you have a little look at the artwork once again before we open it up there, you can see a nice kind of chiral pattern there. It actually reminds me a little bit more of the unit cell from crystallography in inorganic chemistry than it does from organic chemistry actually. So that's a little bit unusual, come to think of it, but still it looks pretty cool actually, this one. But yeah, there you can see at the bottom of the can, that is the Gamma Brewing Company symbol there. It tells you a little bit about the beer on this side as well, and of course you get these nice kind of gamma ray labels, should we say. Plain silver top on the can. I believe I paid 50 Swedish kronor for this one, so that translates to roughly €5. That'll be about £4 something, £4.25 sterling at most, I would say. And then for those of you watching further afield, that will be maybe about $6 American. So all of you have got a kind of conversion. But yeah, 440ml can, this one. Let's get it out and we'll get on with the tasting then. Looking forward to this. Feels like a wee while since I had an IPA from Gamma Brewing actually. So let's get this one out and get it into the glass. Here we go. Ooh. Now I'm going to say straight away, this one looks pretty damn hazy for a 6.5%er. Carbonation is a wee bit active on this one, and you know, to be honest, this is one of the downsides of getting the Danish beers through Systembolaget, because they do sit for a couple of weeks in the warehouse before they get them out of the shell, get them out on the shelf. So I think Systembolaget need to be a little bit more flexible, I think, when it comes to things. But we've talked about this in videos before. But anyway, as you can see, this one's poured pretty much as you would expect from a New England IPA. So we've got a little bit more head on this one, just obviously because the beer has been sitting in the can for a wee while. So about 1.5 fingers of a frothy, I would say cream coloured head. It's definitely not a perfect white head. If I bring it up to the camera, you can see there is a little bit of bump to it, rather than it being completely frothy, if you like, and that will fade away over time, so we'll keep an eye on that. But yeah, certainly quite a bumpy head on this one. But yeah, 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up toward the bottom of the head there. But overall, it does look pretty nice, actually. So in terms of the colour of the beer, this one is actually quite a dark and quite rich yellow. I always like comparing these New England IPAs to different types of fruit juices. So this one for me is quite you know, actually a pretty dark, rich yellow. So I would compare this to a sort of mixed tropical fruit juice rather than anything else. But remember, the colour of your beer depends on 1, the type of malt that you use. This goes a long way to determining the EBC rating. 2, the length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. Any barrel aging that you do or any adjuncts that you put into the beer will also play a role in that as well. But yeah, it's you don't normally have to care about those 2 factors when it comes to New England IPAs. This isn't really a style that you add fruit to, or barrel age. Of course, sometimes you can add fruit to it. Brewski like to do that, but yeah, not all that common. But yeah, in terms of the level of haze on this one, as I said, I think for a 6.5%er, this one is one of the more opaque ones that I've come across. So the level of haze on that is pretty impressive. Level of haze, of course, depends on the yeast, the oak content, and the wheat content. So it can vary from brewery to brewery, beer to beer, and so on. But yeah, in terms of what you'd expect from a New England IPA, this one is definitely not out with the realms of possibility in terms of its appearance. So yeah, let's have a little look at the aroma then and just see how we get on with this one. Very, very curious to see what this is going to have in store for us. So, oh yeah, that smells pretty nice. It is pretty good. So, first impression of it is that it's one of the kind of softer and breadier New England IPAs that I've had from Gamma. Some of them can be very wheaty and bitey, some of them can be very oaty and smooth, but for me this one certainly comes across as being a little bit more kind of soft and bready, actually. But as I've said to you, for me there's 6 different characteristics that you can look out for in a New England IPA. So some of them can be farmhousey and yeasty. They can be sort of rye leaning and grainy, wheaty and bitey, oaty and creamy, barley malt leaning and bready, and they can also be a little bit sweet and brown sugary as well. Now the farmhousey and kind of rye leaning ones are a bit more common in the US, whereas I think over here in Europe they tend to be wheaty, oaty, or kind of bready. Sometimes they can be a little bit sweet as well. But yeah, I think it's more those ones that have been copied over here in Europe compared to the American ones. But yeah, this one does look and smell pretty damn nice. So let's break down the aroma for you before we taste the beer. So backbone of this one, lovely little bit of bread crust to it, absolutely a nice bit of a kind of fresh hedgehog roll type bread crust in there, very, very fresh bread. Tiger roll is another one that I can think of. But yeah, really nice fresh bready characteristics to this beer. On top of the bread crust, you certainly get a nice little bit of white bread. You can smell the wheat thickening that out as well. And at the back of the nose, you can pick out, if you take the aroma in quite deeply, you can smell a little bit of that more kind of bitey, wheaty character coming out of this one. But yeah, I think the breadiness on this one does get thicker and thicker the more that you smell of the beer. Now the oats, and as I've always said, in New England IPAs, oats are a giveaway of how old the beer actually is. Now this one I think is in fairly decent condition. So the younger a New England IPA is, the more kind of creamy and smooth the oats are going to come across as being, but the older it is, they're going to start smelling a little bit drier, and usually that, as I say, that'll tell you how old the beer is. So for me, with this one, you can still get a little bit of that oaty creaminess and slight sweetness out of the oaty character in this beer, but you can smell towards the back of the nose, I think, you can smell a little bit more of that kind of powdery dryness from the oaty character in there. So that tells you the beer is still in pretty good condition, but it's obviously not. It's toward the end of its prime, I guess we could say. So we will be aware of that when we're reviewing this one. This beer is not in its prime condition, but you know, when you buy the Danish beers here in Sweden, you do, through Systembolaget, you do have to realise that. You're not going to get them in their absolute prime condition, actually. So, yeah, that's just how it goes. Systembolaget have to, you know, relax the kind of time frames for the breweries, I think, in this regard. But, yeah, on top of that oaty layer that you have in there, though, which, as I say, gets a little bit sweeter the more that you smell of the beer, on top of that, there is a little bit of a more kind of sweet, brown sugary sort of thing. So I really like how that goes together in this beer as well. There is a really nice wee touch of that kind of Werther's Original note out of this, and there is a wee bit of biscuity character in there, like a McVitie's digestive biscuit, and that is going to come from the Golden Promise. So yeah, the way that the malty side of this beer goes together, I think, is really nice. Let's focus on the green component first, and then the fruity notes, but we'll focus on the hops. Yeah, so green component for me, there is a nice little bit of earthiness to this one, but not too much. I think that's most likely to come from the mosaic in this one. I think the mosaic's the one that's going to give you that wee bit of earthiness. But beyond that, you do have a little bit. Of kind of, how do we say? You do have a nice kind of little bit of floral aromaticity in there. But for me, the hoppy character that you're getting out of this is quite grassy, which I'm surprised about. But then when I think about cashmere, I remember that cashmere does lean a little bit more towards that zesty, grassy side of things. But the green component for me isn't too punchy in this. But as I've said many a time on the channel, when it comes to New England IPAs, these beers rely on late addition and dry hopping. And, you know, to get these big pungent green components, I think you've usually got to go with early addition hopping. And remember, early addition hopping is the one that gives you a lot of the bitterness. It was more commonly used in the old school West Coast IPAs with the very high IBUs. But as you progress through the wort boil, you've got a trade-off from the bitter characteristics of a hop, more in favour of the flavour and aroma things. So a lot of basically the late addition hops come within the last half hour of the wort boil, and usually these beers have about a 90-minute wort boil, and dry hopping of course gives you absolutely no bitterness. It's all flavour and aroma in this. But yeah, the green component for me is not too pungent in this one, but a little bit earthy, a little bit of floral character, and a grassiness in there. Although in fairness, the more that I focus on it, I feel that it's becoming a little bit more zesty actually. But yeah, let's focus on the fruity side of the beer then. So fruity side of things, it is kind of what you would expect if you know these hops. So I do get quite a bit of melon from it, and the melon is the one that is kind of anchoring a lot of the fruity character in this beer. So definitely quite a bit of melon from the cashmere for me. But as I've said in other reviews too, I find that cashmere can be quite a dominating hop, or quite a dominant hop when it comes to these beers. So you do have to be quite careful when you're using it, in my experience. And it can also do quite interesting things with the yeast as well, and give you this sort of woody flavour, in my experience too. But yeah, definitely a nice little bit of melon out of this one. And I get quite a lot of lime as well. I do get quite a bit of lime in this, which is interesting. So yeah, again, that's going to be the cashmere. But you can I actually get quite a sharp and quite ripe orange. And it's interesting because normally mosaic will give you a softer tangerine, and I remember that Azaka can give you a wee bit more of a sharper mandarin. So maybe the Azaka is showing itself up a little bit more than the mosaic, but they combine together to give you this nice, bright, oily and ripe, zesty orange, which is a little bit more like, it's actually a little bit more like Amarillo, come to think of it. So yeah, that's interesting for sure. But yeah, definitely melon in this one, quite a bit of lime for me, and then also quite a big zesty orangey character. I'm not really getting much of the pineapple that you can sometimes get from Azaka, but regardless, this one does smell pretty nice. I'm curious to see whether this is going to really lean towards that more lemon-limey, citrusy side of the things, rather than being a wee bit more orangey and tropical. But knowing Gamma, I'm sure they've produced a nice IPA anyway. But yeah, as I always say, take a bit of time to ponder over the aroma before you get stuck into it. But let's have a taste of this one then and see how we go. So this one is the Chiral 6.5% New England IPA from Gamma Brewing in Herlev in Copenhagen. Let's get stuck in. Slange, skål, cheers. Yeah, that is pretty damn nice actually. Yeah, if you know this brewery, this one is definitely in keeping with the standards that we've set previously. And you know, there's that many New England IPAs out there these days, it's really hard to surprise me with this style. But yeah, it's another solid effort from Gamma Brewing, and as I suspected it would be, it does lean a little bit more towards that kind of lemon limey, citrusy, zesty side of the spectrum. But yeah, I like it for sure. So yeah, I do like this one. This is quite nice. It's a very smooth and slightly creamy IPA. So yeah, it does meet the standards I would expect, and it is kind of what I want. It's a nice little bit of a change of pace, to be honest, as well. So yeah, let's break down the flavour of this for you and describe it a wee bit more in depth. So middle third of your palate then. There is a little bit of a bread crusty backbone there, absolutely. So you get a nice wee bit of that fresh kind of tiger roll, bread crusty sort of thing. On top of that, you get you get a nice you do get quite a thick and dense white bread in there, so you can feel the barley malt in there giving you a wee bit of the kind of dryness. But then on top of that, there is a more you can feel the wheat just kind of thickening it out. So yeah, bread crust, soft, fresh white bread in there from the barley malt, then the wheat just thickening everything up. And yeah, that forms the backbone of the beer, absolutely. But then on top of that, you've got the oats. So yeah, on the oaty side of things, for me, as I said earlier, the oaty side of the beer, in the flavour it can be a little bit different. Like the older the beer is, you will get a little bit more of a kind of wet porridgey sort of thing out of the beer, the older that it gets. And you can feel a little bit of that with this one. I mean, toward the front of that middle third of your palate, you get a bit more of that kind of oaty, creamy sort of thing. Then toward the back of the palate, you start to get a bit more of that kind of wetter, slightly sludgy, porridgey, oatmealy type thing out of it. So you can feel that in this one for sure. But the further you go into the aftertaste, you do get a slightly sweeter element. You do get a slightly sweeter element out of the out of this beer as well. So yeah, I like how this one goes together. Yeah, it's actually, the thing that's interesting about this one for me as well is that it's actually very light in its mouthfeel. So yeah, there's quite a few interesting things going on with this one actually, I have to say. So it does get a thumbs up from me. I do like this. But yeah, the oaty character in this one for me is quite wet and slightly porridgey. So that does tell me, I think this beer's maybe about 2 months old, something like that, maybe a little bit more. But it's still, as I say, in quite good condition. But yeah, I like it. So on top of the oaty layer then, in the dead centre of your palate, you get a little circle there, and you get that Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy sort of thing out of it. And as you move further out toward the edges, of the palate, you've got a little bit more of kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing with this one. So yeah, that goes together really quite nicely. Yeah, on the I think on the middle third of your palate, I think that covers everything, to be honest with you. So yeah, I like that. That's it. So let's focus on the back third of the palate then. So the border region between middle third and back third of your palate, you can feel there is a little bit of a bready build up there, a wee bit more of there is a wee bit more of that bread crusty element, and then you're getting similar flavours on that back third of your palate, but the sort of composition changes a wee bit. So on the back third of your palate, you can feel again that sort of grainy tiger bread crusty sort of thing. You can feel that there. On top of that, you can feel that the white bready layer is a little bit thicker, absolutely, and again it feels a wee bit more grainy. Remember, the bitter flavours tend to come out toward the back of the palate, whereas the sweeter flavours come out further forward. Then on top of that layer, you can feel a wee bit of a kind of dusty, dry, oaty layer in there, but then on top of that, you get the more kind of yeasty components of the beer as well. So I do like how that goes together, definitely. So, yeah, on top of that, the yeasty layer that comes out of this one, it is actually quite farmhousey. And there is a wee bit of that woody flavour I was talking about, so I'm guessing that that's this cashmere, yeast interaction that you can sometimes get. I first noticed that actually in Green Gold Brewing beers from Slovenia. They sent me a box up to review, and that's of course the hop farm of the Roynik family, which is quite a famous one. It's one of the biggest hop farms in Europe actually, but they produce a lot of cashmere. And I first noticed this kind of thing in their beers. But yeah, you get this, the yeasty character in this one is quite like a dense, bready yeast. There's a wee bit of bread crusty character to it, a little bit of an almost kind of slightly peppery spice, but then you also get some woody components coming out of it as well. So yeah, I really like how this one goes together. It gets a big thumbs up from me on the yeasty side of things too, but definitely on the back third of your palate, you can feel the flavour is a little bit taller. And as you come further forward, the flavour just condenses down a little bit, and yeah, as you go further forward on the beer, you get the slightly sweeter flavours, of course. But yeah, I think that covers the malty, yeasty side of things. Let's focus on the hoppy part of the beer. So, back corners of the palate, you do have a nice little bit of earthiness there. As you move further forward, you start to get a little bit of a more kind of floral character. You get a little bit of a herbal character in there as well, actually, but then as you move toward the kind of front corners of the palate, it's distinctly light, more floral, but quite a light floral character. I don't find it overly spicy or anything like that, but there's a fair wee bit of brightness there. Round the front curve of the palate, though, you get that lighter, grassy note out of it, and that, of course, as I mentioned earlier, is one of the trademarks of the cashmere hop, in my experience. So the zesty, grassy character you get out of this one builds up a little bit the further that you go into the aftertaste, so I like that for sure. But yeah, on the front third of your palate then, and the fruity side of the beer, so the border region between middle third and back third of your palate, or sorry, between front third and middle third, brain's not working, front third and middle third, again you get a little bit of that bready build up in there. There's a nice wee bit of a slightly sweeter bready character, but then the base on that front third of your palate is a more smooth, white bready sort of thing. And then on top of that, you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So yeah, toward the back of that front third of your palate, you get a little bit more of a, yeah, you do get a little bit more of a kind of concentrated citrus, I guess we could say, but then as you come further forward, you get that melony note out to it, and the melon flavour is actually quite pungent. And again, as I said, this is the cashmere, absolutely, but that cashmere melon dominates the back half, sorry, of that front third of your palate. My brain really is not working today, guys. But yeah, as you move into the front half of the front third of your palate, you can feel the flavours. The fruit flavours get a little bit sweeter, I would say. There's a bit of a limey character forming the base there. And again, that's one of the traits of cashmere. And I think as you reach the very front tip of your palate, it does become a little bit more of a kind of pungent lemon. But sitting on top of that, you get more of, you do get a little bit more of a kind of sweeter, orangey character out of this one. And it is quite an oily orange. It's not quite as sharp and zesty as I thought it was maybe going to be. But yeah, it's quite an oily, zesty orange that you get out of this one. So yeah, the way that this goes together, I think, is very, very nice. So yeah, the fruity side of this beer for me, the more that you drink of it, the more oily it gets, but it does lean towards that kind of zesty, lemony zesty side of the spectrum. But I like it. I do like this one. Another solid beer from Gamma Brewing, and you can't ask for much more than that. Let's round off the review with the mouthfeel then. So yeah, for me, this beer, in some ways it feels a little bit lighter than some of the other ones I've had from Gamma, but it also feels a little bit more oily and slick in a sense too. It feels like a very clean, but yeah, slightly oily and slick mouthfeel. I'd say this one is pushing towards the top end of mid-bodied for the style. The carbonation, as I say, is nice and smooth in this one. And like I say, a bit oily and slick, but still quite clean. In terms of IBUs, I think it's a fairly standard 30-ish IBU beer. Definitely the malt base, as we said, is a little bit, it does get a wee bit of dryness the further you go into the aftertaste, but yeah, you've got a nice bit of smoothness, little touch of sweetness and so on out of this one. But then, yeah, the fruity side of it is quite oily, and it leans towards that sort of citrusy, zesty end of the spectrum. But yeah, if you know these hops, as I say, Cashmere is quite a dominant, powerful hop. And if you like that hop, I think you will quite enjoy this one. But this is a wee bit different compared to what I've had from some Gamma Brewing beers from memory. But yeah, it's been a wee while since I've had an IPA from them, for sure. And your palate's always evolving, you have to remember that. So this one does feel a wee bit different for me, but that could just be the fact that I've not had something from Gamma in so long, right enough. But yeah, I think we can round off this review there. One of the more citrusy and zesty New Englands that I've had from Gamma, but always nice to try their new beers. So once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Gamma Brewing Company, and we will no doubt return to these guys at some point in the very, very near future. Slàinte, skål, cheers, check out my social media, check out Gamma Brewing social media, and I'll see you soon. This one was the Chiral 6.5% New England IPA from Gamma Brewing Company in Herlev, northwest Copenhagen, on Sjælland in Denmark. Slàinte, skål, cheers.